He's angry about mortgages. It's Angry Mortgage. He's swearing. He's cursing loud. He's old. He's opinionated. And he's been doing this so damn long. This program is about mortgages, and this is mortgage advice, but the advice may not apply to your situation. Contact licensed mortgage professionals for specific recommendations before you make decisions about mortgages. You may not agree with Ron, but if you don't, he thinks you're wrong. Oh, and did we say there is a lot of swearing?
And we are back. Listen, I'd love to have Nick Kyprianou of RiverRock Mortgage Investment Corp. back on the show. I think it's like your third time.
No, second.
Second? Okay. Seemed like it was more. But
Feels like more.
Feels like more. But look, you know what? This show is Angry Mortgage, and we got to talk about mortgages and property values and real estate, because that's what the mortgage business is.
Correct.
You know, banks will tell you the mortgage business is all about borrowers, and in some ways that's true for the banks, although sometimes not as much as they'll tell you.
That's right.
Sometimes they're watching the real estate pretty carefully too. But in Nick's business, and how many years in the business, Nick?
Next month, it'll be 39 years.
39 years. I'm 30. Nick's got me solidly beat. Okay.
So I fool people because I look so young.
Well, you know, you look a lot better than me. God knows
I
you
don't
look
know
better
about
than
that.
me. You look a lot better than me, for God's sakes. But, you know, and folks, I want to make this really, really clear. The level of expertise you get with Nick Kyprianou is off the charts. Nick started in, you know, what was the original alternative lender in the Canadian space, which is Home Trust.
It was Home Savings and Loan.
Home Savings and Loan back in the day. Mentored under the number one guy in the space, Jerry Solway. And rose from, what did you start working underwriter with Jerry?
I was an underwriter.
And rose to the president.
I did. Unbelievable.
Rose to the president. And there's a lot of things happened at Home Trust. We don't have to cover that today.
I was gone way before then.
And you left before then. But Nick, and this part of it's really important. Nick started RiverRock, which has now become an extremely successful mortgage investment corporation in Ontario, from sweet fuck all. Zero. Nick sitting in a chair, making phone calls, talking to brokers.
I had one employee.
You had one employee. Okay, you had one employee. Okay. Nick starts from one employee. But people, let me tell you this. If you're really fucking good at what you do, everything's possible, okay? And when it comes to alternative lending, there's Nick and maybe two or three other people in the province, and that's it. That's the go-to people, all right? So we're going to talk to you a little bit about the private mortgage side, but mostly we're going to talk about property type, property value, regional issues, because as Nick talks about all the time, and I thank him for it constantly, because there's a lot of people try to spin the alternative lending mortgage world as something different, okay? But the alternative mortgage lending world, in terms of, you know, mortgage investment corps, which is essentially private money. It's very sophisticated private money, but it's private money. It's people's investing, it's corporations investing. You've got lots of investors. I know that, and they're not just individuals. But it's also all about the real estate.
Right.
That's what it is.
Correct.
Okay. And if you don't have the core discipline in real estate, you run risks.
Correct.
And you're seeing it every day.
Yeah.
All right. So
I would say the business is about process and discipline, blocking and tackling. It's not a sexy business.
Not a sexy business, but Nick started from zero to a high level of success because he's good at the blocking and tackling. Okay, really good. So, and by the way, this is no bullshit. This is true. There is no magic to private lending.
No.
You can get really, really, really big, and you can do max volume commercial lending. We've got some people we know in the business like Romspen who do that. And let me tell you, there are issues when you do that.
Oh, yeah.
How long have they been gated now at Romspen? It's been
a couple of years.
Couple of years, okay. And I'm not looking to ungate anytime soon.
No.
So yeah, but in Nick's business, because he's insisted on plain vanilla, executed carefully, very carefully, you don't have any of those issues, do you?
Well, we're all exclusively residential homes, detached semis, townhouses, small condo group. Middle class, we don't do the big ticket stuff. And predominantly homeowners in urban, suburban areas. We don't do rural, we don't do small town, we don't do construction, we don't do commercial.
Don't do development.
Don't do development. Like I always say, we like it when you drive down the street and everybody looks the same except for the color of the brick and the siding and the landscaping. They're easy to evaluate and they're easy to sell if something goes wrong.
Same house, same street, same subdivision. It is cookie cutter is best.
100%.
Cookie cutter is best. Okay. So the concept behind that is also understanding real estate intimately. But, there have been a few default issues. We'll just touch on this very briefly. Mm-hmm. So in one of the things that we're experiencing in the mortgage business, and so are the banks, by the way, the banks had a default rate, which is 90 days of arrears. Mm-hmm. Banks had a default rate of like 1.2, 1.4. We go back to COVID, of course. If the government's sending you money, default's not a big,
right.
not very optional,
and
right?
You don't get to leave your house. You got nothing to spend your money on.
So, that was virtually no default. It was like 12, 14 basis points. And again, people, a basis point's a 1/100%. Yeah. So we're way below 1/4%.
Correct.
Of people going 90 days without paying. It's up now. I think we're up to like 23, 24 basis
Correct.
points. So it's almost got to 1/4%. Mm-hmm. Nick, I think it's fair to say that in banking, 36 beeps is still a very reasonable number. I mean, if every bank in Canada went from 23, 24 today to 35, 36 basis points, they wouldn't care less. I mean, it's just we have to adjust some numbers, right. But it's just life. That's life. That's what it was for 50 years.
That's right.
Okay. So, but we don't know when that's going to happen or how it's going to happen. But in your world, it's a little different. I remember you telling me maybe a year ago that your default was virtually zero.
Yeah, we've got higher defaults, right? But our numbers are always skewed by the fact that if somebody bounces a payment and they don't respond to emails, phone calls, texts, whatever, by day 16, we put them in legal action. So as soon as you put them in legal action, even though it's not 90 days, that counts as a default. But I always say that just is noise on our books because we found that we looked at all the years we've been open. If we put somebody into legal action, only 24% of the time do we have to sell their home. 76% of the time, they solve their own problem. Sell it themselves.
So they either find the money,
refinance, pay us out, sell the house, put a second mortgage on behind us, and keep us up to date.
But the bottom line is, as we all know in Canada, it's kind of been a silent recession, I think.
I think since 23. Completely agree.
It is not, there is no positives. Like I want to say that openly. I don't think there's any positives in the Ontario economy today.
No.
There's nothing you could point at and say, oh yeah, this is going to boom. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that item is. It's going to boom. Okay. Construction's been shut down for 14, 16 months. Yeah. Okay. So, residential anyway. The government's still paying to build hospitals. So.
Yeah. That's right.
That's our tax money. It goes on forever.
That's right. They have endless pockets.
endless money, fountain of money. But we know the Ontario economy is not in a good spot, and yet defaults are still reasonable.
Correct.
But now we're going to talk about valuation because, as you said to me on many occasions, that's really the business you're in.
Right.
You're in the real estate analysis business.
Correct.
Okay. So let's start with the fact that people in Ontario must recognize it is very regional. Mm-hmm. And it's very product oriented.
Right.
Okay. Now, you always stayed away from condo mortgages. So expand on that a bit.
Yeah, years ago we would do them because it was booming and we were doing mostly owner occupied and the math worked, right? But then as the condo market got crazier and crazier, the math no longer worked, right? So, our book is about 6% high-rise condos, but our loan to values are much lower on that product and we're much more sensitive to the buildings, locations, and everything else. So it's not a big part of our business. Our main part of our business are detached, semis, and townhouses. We love that product. You can sell that product any day of the week. It's all about price. That's the beauty of lending on residential. It's all about price. If you have a banquet center that you've taken back, the price can be zero because you've taken it back because nobody's renting the banquet center.
Yeah, if you have to power a pizza shop out of their commercial building, I mean, you better find a pizza seller. Okay?
Yeah,
you're out of business. Yeah,
there's certain things, single-purpose industrial buildings, like you take that back, there's nothing you can do with it.
So, folks, what we mean by take back is you've gone through the power of sale process and you become the owner of the property. Okay,
right.
Which is the ultimate cure for all arrears. Is that you go through a legal procedure and you end up as the owner of the building and you sell it. By the way,
but could be the ultimate pain.
Could be, which is a lot of work. Okay?
A lot of
energy goes into that. Okay, it's not a simple thing.
And since the pandemic, it's a lot more energy and a lot more work.
A lot more energy, a lot more work. I'll tell you one thing about social media and Google, folks. It allows everybody who does stop paying their mortgage to investigate how to deal with it.
Correct, right. But they don't always get the best information.
No.
Sometimes people think the best thing to do is fight. Put up a defense and fight. And I always, when that happens, we call them and say, you're spending your own money. Like, you're paying for our lawyer out of your equity. If we can work something out immediately, let's do it. Like I always say, if you're more, prior to the pandemic, if you started a legal action in Ontario under power of sale, within 5 to 6 months, you would have vacant possession.
The borrower would either sell it themselves
or you would step in, get the sheriff, go out there and evict them.
Yeah.
Now that same process takes 10 to 12 months. Right. And if they put up a defense, it could add more months to it, right? Because you have to go to court. And my argument is, if your payments are $10,000 a month, just to make up a number, because it's round, so 5 to 6 months is $50,000, $60,000. 10 to 12 is $100,000 to $120,000. That's all equity disappearing. So why wouldn't you try to solve the problem sooner than later?
I want to really emphasize Nick's point to everybody who's listening, and I realize virtually no one who's listening is in danger of losing their house, but it is really important to understand this. This mortgage contract is probably the most finite, easy to understand,
simplest contract in the world.
I give you this money.
And you pay me back every month.
And you pay me back. And when you stop paying, your house is the security.
Right.
So if you don't ever pay, I get to take your house away and sell it and get my money back. This is like 200, 300-year-old law.
Right.
Okay. It has been tested in court a gajillion times. Nobody's ever won. Right? Nobody ever says, no, I think this is a good reason for me not to pay the people who gave me the money. Because we can prove you got the money, right? So
there's no defense.
There's no defense. You could create a lot of smokescreen about what you might think you were wronged. But in the end, you got to give the money back.
That's right. You still owe the money.
There's literally no more cut and dried contract on earth, folks, than this mortgage. Yeah. Okay. It is court tested thousands and thousands of times. There's been a jillion cases.
And you get the odd bar, oh, you just want my house. I want nothing less than your house. Trust me.
Yeah.
I do not want to be going through this. I'd rather just sit down with you. Let's work out a solution and execute the solution. So you walk away with as much money as possible. We get paid off and you can go back with your life.
It's another thing I got to emphasize. My dealings in private mortgages, I am like a rounding error to Nick. Okay. But we do private lending in our company. And this is so true. I do not want the house.
Nothing.
I don't want anything to do with it.
No.
I don't want to power you out and then somehow have my cousin buy it on my behalf. We don't want any of that.
That's right.
Because it doesn't work, number one. You get caught eventually, number one. And that's totally against the law. But most importantly, our world is best when you just pay and then sell.
I'm in the lending business.
We're in the lending business.
Not the property management business.
We're not in the lawyer business. We're not in the lawyer business, okay? We don't want to have to send, when the house is empty, we don't have to send somebody to clean the house up.
And shovel the snow.
Pay to mow the lawn because we got to list it and sell it.
Got to do all that stuff.
You have no idea. Nick and I have done it for a living for a long time, and it is uniformly, even if we have people trained to do it, it's uniformly a pain in the ass.
Completely.
And houses get broken into.
100%.
Empty houses get broken into.
All the time.
All kinds of bad shit happens.
Bad stuff always happens.
Always. Okay, so yes, Nick is right. It is absolutely true. There's no rational private lender who is a real operator whoever wants to take over a house,
100%.
you want the house sold. You want payments, refinance. You go back to find a bank who's going to help you pay us off, sell the house, whatever the strategy was. We don't want any part of kicking you out of your house. Right. None of us do. Okay. But let's talk about real estate. So we talked about condos, but let's go a little deeper. Mm-hmm. You were always very cautious.
Correct.
Totally cautious about it, and for good reason. But just explain the reasoning for a second. You had the philosophy from day one.
Yeah. Well, so I got into this business in the kind of 86, right? In 86 to 89 were not too bad.
They were great.
Yeah, but I was too young to make any money, right? So they weren't great for me. And then in 89, April 89 kind of was the peak. Yep. And then lots of bad things happened, right? Interest rates went up dramatically to double digit in Ontario. Unemployment was over 12% in Ontario. You had mass speculation in the real estate market.
Run up, like 86, 89.
89, like
big.
Builders were building out streets with no pre-sales. Condominium buildings were being built with no pre-sales. Just a flood of inventory on the market.
Okay, I got to interrupt you for a second. Listen to that, folks. Listen to what Nick just said. Yep. Condominiums were being built with no pre-sales.
Right.
That's how crazy.
And then to make it worse, you could pre-buy a condo, but you only need to put $500 down.
Good Lord.
So somebody would pull up and say, well, why buy one? I can buy five.
It's only $500.
Look how much wealthier I'm going to be when I flip these things, right? So, and we saw a lot of that, right? And then you had an NDP government that won a majority that created chaos in the province, which ties to our conversation a bit about with real estate values with what the Liberal government's plans are. And then you had a Quebec referendum in the middle of it, right? So uncertainty creates first of all, high rates, high unemployment, massive uncertainty is the worst possible recipe for real estate, right? Yep. So
sound familiar, folks?
Right. Anyway. So, back in those, the values were dropping. Residential values dropped a little over 25% over that period of time. Commercial values dropped 50%.
There's a crash.
It was a total crash, right? And I remember I went to go look for a job, and I met this regional VP from CIBC. I'll never forget this. And I said, he goes, do you want to make a lot of money? And I go, yeah, I'm in my 20s. He goes, get out of the mortgage business. I'll never forget that. And afterwards, after the few years, from 90 till 95, I was thinking this guy was right.
Yeah, because it was, folks, it was bad. It was a big drop in 90, 91, and then just kind of little drops, like little 2% and 3% reductions. Nothing ever got off the mat until mid 95. It just started to creep up.
Yeah, we used to always say, is that a light at the end of the tunnel or a train coming?
Train, because the train was coming for years. It came for a number of years.
No relief.
So that's what sort of your experience with condos back then.
Right, and commercial and everything. From that experience, I thought, you know what? Our portfolio, we had residential, but we also had a lot of condos, but we also had a lot of banquet centers, single-purpose industrial buildings, C-grade strip malls. And I thought the only thing that kind of moved was middle-class residential homes. You could always sell them. Right.
Even in the worst times, the value was down, but they went. You could sell them. Okay.
So I've just continued that philosophy. You know what? A house is a house is a house. As long as you get the value right, right, and you lend the right loan to value on that house, you'll be fine. Because I always say, and we've actually trademarked this, bad things happen to good people, right? People get sick, they die, they lose their job
loss,
they get divorced, right? That's a big one, right? So at the end of the day, your house is your constant, right? You can lend to the best A borrower in the world. If they die, they're not an A borrower anymore.
No, they're not.
Right? So when in our underwriting, not only do we put a tremendous amount of emphasis on our valuation of the real estate, over and above, we use third-party appraisers, but I always say anybody can have a bad day. So we have a proprietary model where we do a deep dive on that value. Then after that, we say, okay, say something bad does happen to these people. What's our exit strategy? So we know what all our friction costs are. We reverse engineer the numbers, and that's how we make our final decision. Because you never know what's going to happen. Right now, we've had to adjust that model over the last few years because the court system's slower and everything else. So you tweak the model.
More friction.
Yeah, you don't make the model and go, okay, this model's locked in stone. You got to keep watching the market and looking ahead, going, what's happening? What could happen? And then tweak your model accordingly.
So again, thinking about the condos, which you recently decided, I don't want to make that a big chunk of my business,
right?
In terms of equity-based lending. But you had a comment earlier in the day that you thought the math just stopped making sense after 2019.
Yeah, like when you were buying a condo in the 2017, before 2019, especially before 2018.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? When you were buying a condo before 2018, you were probably paying anywhere from $600 to $750 a foot, right?
Mainly in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
625, 650.
Somewhere in that range, right? Depending on the quality of the building and location and everything. So you could rent that place out and you might not be making a lot of money, but you'd be a break even.
It wasn't a dead loss.
It wasn't a dead
guaranteed loss. Yeah.
Right? Anybody that's been buying, well, the problem is if you bought in the pre-construction in the beginning of 22 or 22 after,
or even 20.
Yeah, you're not worth what it's. You bought a unit for $800. It's worth $600, maybe
but
less.
Some people bought a unit for $1,200 a foot.
Yeah, right. So they're toast. The banks have stepped up to underpin those ones for the A borrowers, but not everybody's an A borrower.
No.
So those people get hit hard. But we differ slightly where I think there's no new buildings being built right now.
No, none. Zero. And no new high-rise condos built in the last 15 months.
Right.
No starts.
Now, I personally felt, listings have spiked up dramatically. Like the latest data is days on market for a high-rise condo, 7 months.
It's going up. I think last month is like 8.5.
It's creeping up.
Yeah.
So, but what's interesting is you've been seeing a softening in values, but you haven't seen
no crash yet.
No crash
yet.
So when you keep drilling down, and we've talked about this before, and Benjamin Tolf, the deputy chief economist at CIBC, has written reports on this, where he says 50% of high-rise condos in the city are owned by individual investors, but they've discovered that these people bought it for a couple of reasons. One was they knew they were buying a unit at a loss, but for tax purposes, but also the goal was eventually to give this unit to one of their children. And this was a way that, the tenant would pay for most of the carrying costs and they'd have to throw in money every month. So,
but Nick, that wouldn't be true if you bought 6 of them.
No. Well, if you bought 6 of them, that's the greedy guy. Right.
Well, didn't you have a guy who called you up for a?
That's right. We had a call last week that a real estate agent, because he knows the market.
Of course.
And he bought 25 pre-construction units in a building.
Come on.
25.
25 for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they go, would you do it? And we said, obviously, no. And they said, okay, how many would you do? And it was the same answer we gave first time, none. Like
the answer was zero for 25 and 0 for 1.
Yeah. Like that's you're just asking for trouble, right? Like a file like that, you close it and then you just take it over the collection department. Like you don't even let it take any work paperless, but figuratively speaking, you just.
But to your point, you could buy one condo,
right? And
on the assumption you weren't going to have some on running capital losses.
That's right. But you're going to get appreciation gain if you play the long game. Like I always say to people, if you're going to buy something, if you're not, your intention is not to keep it for 10 years. Maybe you should think twice about it, right? It's like the Warren Buffett approach to stocks, right? Like when you ask, how long do you buy a stock for? My goal is forever, right? Mm-hmm. Like now, real estate.
Well, he sold a shit ton of stock in the last year. Yeah, but anyway.
But I think that like it's a 10-year mindset, especially if you're if with real estate. I think that's my personal belief.
Sure, but none of that's true if you're buying in multiples.
No, you're buying it because you think you're going to flip a bunch at closing.
And that's ultimately where we're at today. So yeah, we have a slightly different opinion on that. Like I think that, but what I think one area that we agree on is that sort of the right price is $650 a foot. At that point, you make money.
Yeah.
You break even. You don't lose.
But the problem is $1,000 a foot is basically break even in and around there.
To build them.
To build them,
yeah.
right? So that's why nobody's building, because they can't sell them.
Mind you, $100,000 of that is development fees you're paying a city.
That's right.
So, and another 100 is infinite delays getting it approved, because you have to, as Nick well knows, when you have to build a high-rise condo, you got to buy the land first.
That's right.
And pay a mortgage on it, or pay some kind of financing on it, or you have some leverage against it.
Right.
And you're paying during the 4.5 years it takes just to get the city to say yes.
Yeah.
So you've got so many false expenses,
right?
Taxes, red tape, years of bullshit. I mean, look,
and the cost.
I'm going to build a condo. It was a parking lot. Now I think City of Toronto, you want me to build a condo, right? Because fuck the parking lot.
It's a lot of money.
That's a ton of money, but you're going to make me wait 3.5 years just to say yes.
And then they get to close a lane for the construction, which I appreciate. And they only charge them, I think it's $40 a day.
Yeah,
which is nice for all the traffic disruption.
Did you know in Manhattan that's against the law?
For a condo development? I didn't know that.
But for any construction in Manhattan,
to take up a road lane.
It's been the law for 40 years.
That's a great law.
It is a fantastic fucking
We should have that law.
That law is the right. And that's why when you go to Manhattan, you see that whenever even people are doing repairs on a building, you can't even close the sidewalk on one side. You have to put this beautiful cover over the sidewalk. And because New York, Manhattan figured out a long, long time ago, don't fuck with the people who live here.
Right.
Don't
you
do
know
it.
what? We were in Manhattan in November, and I couldn't believe how much easier it was to get around than it was here.
Now you know the answer.
Yeah.
There is no, if you're building anything.
I guess that's why our roads are so good, because of all the development fees.
Yeah, that must be why everything.
Why I'm blowing a tire on a pothole.
And why the Crosstown LRT was finished 3 years ago. That's all the development fees. Yeah, that's how that worked.
Yeah, so at least you feel good about that.
So there is but your observation of these condos is, if you have to have such an enormous price discount to be able to move them, if you had to acquire them through power of sale, you can't get involved. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, all right.
But the other thing is, and I'm a little more optimistic than you on this, where I think by 2028 there's going to be an undersupply of high-rise condos, because nobody's building, nothing's being built. The population is still growing. Right,
more slowly than it was.
More slowly, but one stat that gets overlooked is, when they go, the people aren't leaving. They're not keeping that number in. Like, they're not leaving.
Oh, well, though there's a different study you can do where you analyze cell phone utilization.
Oh, that's right.
If cell phone utilization starts to fall off a cliff, a new application for cell phone, if it goes negative, because go talk to Bell. They had to cut their dividend for the first time in forever because they're doing so poorly. But anyway, we can. I'm more of a 20-30 guy on condos, because I think too many of the products were really, really bad. If you build a 485 square foot condo, you should be ashamed of yourself.
I always say 550 and under. Like, I ignore that. That's that's a closet.
There's a lot of them, Nick.
Yeah,
There's
but that's a closet.
Okay. All right.
That's not a condo.
That's not a real.
You can't expect. That's like a monkey in a cage. You can't expect somebody to live in that.
We call them dog crates, Nick. We call them dog crates. All right. So you've purposely stayed away from condos. It served you well, and I would agree with you on a 1,000 square foot condo. That's someplace where somebody's living, raising a family.
Civilized.
It's very civilized, and it's also if you're only lending it 60% of that, you're fine. And by the way, those people are there for the duration. You had a great stat about the City of Toronto versus ownership length of time versus going out into the 905.
So this is that from Terranet, like the average in the 416 core of the city, people live on average around 17, 18 years.
In the same house.
In the same house.
Yeah.
When you get outside the city, it drops down to 7.
Okay, that's a really, really important number. We're going to come back to this interesting aspect of Core 416 Toronto in a minute. I know that pisses people off. People in Calgary listening, we don't give a fuck about your goddamn Toronto. You're always talking about Toronto. Well, it's the biggest province in Canada. It's 37% of the population of the country, and it's the 4th largest city in North America. So,
exactly.
so that is a great stat, and it's something that I've always sort of known instinctually, but I hadn't seen the hard numbers.
Yeah.
And that's very, very meaningful. When people stay in a house for an average of 18 years, that means there's a bunch of people staying for 30.
Right.
Yep.
Well, and then the other thing is people move to the city because it's a lifestyle thing. Like they'll sacrifice. I'm not going to get a garage, might not even get a driveway.
Parking space.
I'm going to get a smaller house, but I like to walk to places. I'll take this. I like public transit. I want to have that all available.
I want to
get
have
to work
every
quicker.
kind of restaurant on earth available at all times.
That's
okay,
right.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off, right?
Yes.
So they move there for those reasons. When you're out in the outer regions, like the people like to move up, like in
And by the way, we're not beating up on the people in the 905.
No, I lived in the 905.
But it's also true. What Nick says is really intelligently stated, because if you live in Mississauga, you may decide to move to Markham,
right?
And it's all sort of the same.
Right.
I mean, it's not like it's you got to think about where your kids are going to school, but it's not like the houses look different.
Right.
It's not like the geography or the nothing changed radically.
Right.
Okay. And it's about the same distance to downtown anyway. So there you go.
What's the difference?
So you can, and you're right. It's more aspirational. It's more, if I'm in this size of house in Burlington, I want to be in a bigger house in another part of Burlington because that's sort of the way my direction of my life.
My natural progression.
Natural progression.
Start having kids.
But in core 416, when you buy a house, you might just renovate it endlessly.
That's right.
To because you like your neighborhood, you like your neighbors, you like to walk to the restaurant.
Yeah. Like I live in the city. Like people hardly, like my neighbors have been the same neighbors since I lived there. We lived there forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. So we'll come back to some of the value issues there, but let's think about now when we've broken down the products. So this condo catastrophe is real.
Yeah.
Not going away. There's a fix eventually, but we don't know when, and sure as hell is now.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of valuation, it's tough. It's probably only going to grind down. Let's think about the other parts of Ontario, because you lend through the whole province, although we've made some adjustments. Changed your regionality. So as the example of areas you worry about, I think you've stopped lending west of London.
Yeah, we stopped there 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Because, in the early 90s.
And that's Windsor too, folks.
Yeah. So. Yeah. In the early 90s, like that area just got decimated. Like Windsor, like it was just a nightmare, right? And I don't know why. And I guess because it's so heavily automotive manufacturing, when recessions hit, that area just gets pummeled.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what we saw during the pandemic. So what happened at first? I made our first decision when the pandemic first started. We were seeing people from the GTA buy houses in Windsor, but the problem is they would see this house that was generally trading for $500,000, but the person from Mississauga or Brampton would go, "Oh my God, look at this house! I couldn't buy this house for under $1 million. I can get it for $750." Well, you just got ripped off because it's only worth $500.
You spent $250 too much. Yeah.
Right. So we were seeing that, and we were seeing it so regularly. We just said, you know what? Why keep just saying no to people? Because people were going, "Well, you're an idiot. This guy paid $750 for this. You don't get it." And okay, well, yeah, maybe
we'll wait and see if I got it.
We'll be okay. We'll stop lending there so we don't get into these disagreements. So we just stopped west of London, and let me tell you, our life is way better for it because of it. Just from the stories I hear.
Oh, sure. Windsor is going to go through its cycle again.
And we generally go about as far.
We're not mad at you, Windsor. Neither Nick or I are mad at you. We love you people down there, but it is what it is.
It's warmer.
It's warmer too, yeah.
And we go about as far north as Barrie. Once again, the subdivision theme always, like we don't like rural
house looks
small
the same,
towns.
Yeah.
We like everybody looking the same.
So those values although those values have come off substantially in all those.
You can still sell them.
You can still sell them, but in distant 905, those values have all come off.
Right.
And but I don't think Nick was a big lender on those units at the height in 2021. You're pretty cautious.
Listen, you cautious. You always get caught on something.
Sure you do.
Absolutely. Nobody's smart every day of the week.
Yep.
So we got caught on stuff, but we eat our losses out of our management fee. We don't pass the losses on to our investors. So that makes you a little more disciplined when you're eating the losses out of your own pocket.
Yeah, if you eat what you kill and you get poisoned, you're very, very cautious. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you made a great point today when we were speaking earlier that Ottawa is a company town and the company's doing really well.
Yeah. We like Ottawa. The appraisers, and I've always found this, and this is just my personal view. I'm not knocking appraisers in Ottawa, but I tend to find they tend to be a little more optimistic.
They're enthusiastic.
Very enthusiastic, right? So we're always a little bit at odds with them sometimes, but we find a way to make it work.
Because it is, at the end of the day, a company town. And the company's doing very well. They're hiring endlessly. There's infinite supply of money for
Carney has no plans to cut the extra 40% of that Trudeau increased them.
No. And in fact, it doesn't, there seems to be no path of decline for that thing. And that is one thing about a company town, folks. If the company's doing really, really well, and the employment is always on the up, and the interesting about that company town is you can't lose your job.
Yeah. I even thought that he would say, when people retire, we won't replace them. But he didn't even say that.
Carney's not said that.
He didn't even say that.
No, he didn't say that.
I was hoping at least give me that. Throw me a bone.
Yeah, it's like, so that real estate, and it's true to this day, when we talk to people who are buying in Ottawa, it's about the same price as it was 2 years ago.
They don't get the big swings up and the big swings down. True. It's a little more stable.
And cottages you never lent on.
No, we don't lend on cottages.
Because you view that marketplace, explain it.
Yeah, like I always think these are luxuries, right? Like it's nice to have, but you don't have to have, right? And I always say it's the hierarchy of debt, right? Your house is at the top of the pyramid. So when things start to go...
The house you live in.
The house you live in is at the top of the pyramid. So when things start to go bad, first of all, you start with making adjustments, right? You say, okay, we're going to cut back on our spending. We're not going to Disney, and then we're going to go camping. Oh, we can't even go camping. We'll go in the tent in the backyard. Then you start, okay, we don't need 2 cars. We'll go down to 1 car, right? But then the next plan is maybe we'll take on a boarder or tenant. We've already changed the lifestyle. Maybe take on a boarder or tenant, maybe get a second job. But with the cottage, it's very difficult to go to family members and say, hey, can you give me some money because I got to keep my cottage going, right?
So the cottage gets sold.
The cottage just gets sold.
Or they stop paying the mortgage. One or the other. So that is, to your mind, by the way, I'm in 1,000% agreement, that cottage property could be subject to extreme fluctuations in value.
Well, and then the other problem is it comes back to the banquet center example.
Yeah.
In 23-24, not a lot of cottages were moving. Like when the times are tough, you don't go, I'm going to go buy a cottage now. Right? You hunker down. Like uncertainty paralyzes people, right? Like I always use the example, not everybody likes it, but I really like it. If I told you I was going to cut your arm off next Wednesday,
Jesus. Wow.
I know it's extreme, but I like to use extreme examples. You'd be paralyzed. You'd be stressed out. You wouldn't be sleeping. What am I going to do? But next Wednesday, when I lopped off your arm, you spring to action. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to change my lifestyle.
Nick, I think you'd still be pretty pissed, but anyway, that's true.
You might be pissed, but you'd be more focused on what you're going to do next.
All right, so to get back to cottages, but without cutting off our arms, the problem becomes that the buyer pool evaporates.
Yes.
Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay.
And so, I thought this year was going to be the year when you didn't see a big increase in prices, but you saw a big increase in sales activity, house sales activity. So,
but we haven't,
but it was leading that way. In the Q4 last year, 20% of renters said that they plan to purchase a home in 2025. So even if they exaggerated and that number was only 10% of renters, even 5% of renters.
It's a big number.
That's a big number, any of those numbers, right? So I thought that, okay, rates have come down. It looks like they're going to go down a bit more. Inflation's under control. Unemployment's not bad. right?
Yeah, Ontario's probably the worst unemployment in Canada.
Yeah, but it's still not bad.
Still not off the charts.
Not off the charts, right? And I thought this was going to be it. But then when Trump introduced all these tariffs and chaos ensued, all of a sudden a big wave of uncertainty rolls on.
Yeah,
so
you
people
can't get more uncertain than this shit.
Right.
Yeah.
People sit on the bench, right? And they're going to go, I'm going to wait. Now, I do believe that these are going to get resolved one way or another. Even if they don't get resolved the way we exactly want it, just knowing what it is better than nothing.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind.
Right.
I think that eventually Trump makes a deal. My philosophy is slightly different than yours. So my belief is Canada could be down the line. Canada could be in the fall and in the winter. Because at the end of the day, Trump needs to make a deal with China. Trump needs to make a deal with Japan. Trump needs to make a deal where, it's create, because there's going to be some empty shelves. Right. In the United States 100%. From China, for sure. It's just the reality. So I think that may be the priority. We may not be a priority. We may be down the line. And I think the farther down the line we are, the more auto manufacturing leaves Ontario.
Yeah, I think auto manufacturing has been slowly getting...
Or even not even that slowly.
Well, automation, I remember when I was a kid, I lived in Hamilton area, Stony Creek, and like Stelco and DeFasco employed like 22,000 people.
Yeah.
Now they employ 2,500 people.
Right.
It's not because they're producing a lot less steel. It's automation, right? Like, when I was at Home Trust, in I think it was 2005, the Toyota plant out in Cambridge offered tours to management companies to see their management style of how they operated. So, I happen to know somebody, and I was able to take the management team out there, and they put you on a tram and explain everything to you. And one of the things that I found so amazing is there was no people hardly. Like to build a car.
There's still some people, yeah.
Yeah, but not a lot of people, right?
But there's some people in the car parts places.
Yeah, that might be a bit different. I've never been in that, but the car assembly plant, right? Not a lot of people. It's quite shocking.
If you ever want to be scared about no people, so I was born in British Columbia, where there's pulp and paper, and there actually was some manufacturing of like toilet paper and Kleenex at one point years ago, and it all went away. But still, if you go to the toilet paper manufacturing plants, of which there's only a handful now in the United States, these huge plants, they're like multiple football fields big. There's like on the floor of the plant, there's about 17 people. Like it is bizarre levels of automation. Like you've never imagined how much automation they have. So yeah, I would agree with you, but still, those are jobs that are decent paying jobs in automotive and automotive parts. And when they go away, I don't see a lot of jobs replacing them unless we all just bring them into the government. They all just sit in CRA and audit each other.
That's right.
Okay. So I see some problems there. So I see that Canada's turmoil may last longer than some other countries, but I am in agreement. It gets resolved. Like this doesn't just stay as an open wound forever.
And don't forget, this hurts the Americans too, right? It's not like it's one person loses, one person wins. Everybody loses.
I think the Americans could give two shits on cars and steel. They like the aluminum because the aluminum is the best pricing in North America. But I don't think they get. I think when Trump said he didn't need our cars, he was telling the truth.
Yeah, and I think that and they're the automotive people workers are concentrated, right? Windsor,
just Ontario.
Yeah,
it's just there's nothing else except Ontario.
Windsor, Oshawa, and Oakville, right?
Yeah.
So I think that. I'm not overly concerned. Like I think values, I personally believe values have leveled off now. Like my opinion, if you're a first time buyer, and I've said this to you before, and I don't think you agree with me, but that's okay. If you're a first time buyer and you feel comfortable in your income and you feel, if everything is okay, right now is the time to buy.
Because, we differ. I think
in 6 months, 7 months, I think certainty will lock in. A lot of people will jump off the bench. And I'm not saying values are going to go up 5-10%. I'm saying 1 to 3, maybe, and depending on the area. But that's 1 to 3% that you don't have to pay buying now.
Sure.
And you might even,
Nick,
and on the right deal.
Not with the condos. Not with the
No,
condos.
no. Condos aren't in the conversation. But this is an and you might even get a bit of a deal, right?
Maybe.
So I think this is the time.
So let's talk about one thing that is intriguing to both you and I, and it's something we've noticed, and I think we both have a similar idea of what the reason is behind it. The values of properties in Core 416, they didn't go up as much in 2021. The big explosion of property
Didn't happen
values
in the
across
core.
Canada didn't happen in the core, and now similarly, they're not going down as fast in the core,
Exactly.
or hardly at all. Like if you're trying to sell a semi in below Bloor Street or below Lawrence, I mean, I think it sells in a week.
100%.
I think it sells in a week.
As long as it's priced, as long as you're not being
it can't
silly.
be crazy, but as long as it's correctly priced, it's gone. Okay?
100%.
You know what I keep trying to tell, this is, again, pisses people off in other parts of Canada, I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes people don't have any idea just how much fucking money there is in Toronto.
Yeah, there's a lot of money.
It's an astronomical amount of money. There's a lot of rich people here, and almost none of those rich people want to live anywhere else but Core 416.
Correct.
A little bit of Oakville, a little bit of Markham, okay? But
for the most part,
we're done
you
now.
don't get a lot of flashy here.
Well, I could beg to differ. I can introduce you to some people who are very flashy, but the bottom line is this. There's so much money in Toronto, folks. So many wealthy people. Some people put a lot of effort into keeping their wealth a secret, but at the end of the day, they want to live in those houses, in those neighborhoods.
100%.
Okay? And they're not affected by recession. I want to say this is maybe the hardest lesson of recession and of all the sort of money printing we went through. And even though CBC doesn't agree with the term money printing, I don't give a shit. But all the money printing we went through in 2021 and part of 2022 is that is good for the rich. Mm-hmm. Inflation just harms the poor and the middle class.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, if you got cheap borrowing to buy assets, you need to be rich first, okay? Yeah. Poor people and middle class people don't buy a lot of assets.
People that don't have money have trouble borrowing money.
That's exactly right, okay? And so it just exacerbated the wealth gap. It exacerbated income disparity. Correct. And in Canada, I would tell you this. There is some of it in Vancouver because we've both been to Vancouver and there's some wealthy people living in beautiful places.
Beautiful.
But the number of wealthy people, and look, there's no bank CEOs don't live anywhere else but here.
Right.
Insurance company CEOs don't live in it. The top lawyers in Canada only live here. The top consulting firms in Canada, the bosses only live here. Right. It's a concentration.
You live here.
Well, fuck, you're the guy. You're the guy with money, not me. But it's a concentration of wealth that doesn't want to leave their houses in the nice part of town. And that's why we see this disparity, the dropping in values in 905 and the distant towns, like you discussed, in Windsor and the cottage country and all the rest. And that's just not happening.
It was funny, though, during the real softening of the market, like 23, 24, if you looked at cottage properties that were selling, they were the uber expensive ones, which was very interesting. It
is interesting. You're right, because only the rich were interested in the first place. Yeah. And they have money to buy.
That's right.
All right. Look, it's a great conversation. I want to really thank Nick for coming because this careful analysis of what properties are worth is going to become so much more meaningful over the next coming months because we're going to be reading nothing but this. Yeah. It's going to be a story that's going to go on for the whole rest of this year. What properties are up, what properties are down, where the trouble lies. So thank you, Nick. Thank you for your analysis.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
If you like the pod, well, don't just sit there. Go to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all the other ones and like the pod. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep being angry at mortgages and swearing about mortgages. Angry Mortgage could use your support.